Hi, welcome to the Little Gardens Homestyle text class of A Course in Miracles. Grab your book and read along with us.
So good morning, Jan. What are we doing today?
Today is one of, you've heard this before, one of my favorite sections.
They all become our favorite.
Not all of them, no, but this one is so good. The Undivided Will of the Sonship, and it's on page 146 of A Course in Miracles, this version. So it is chapter 8, section 5, and it's quite short, and it has one basic idea, like we could zip through this, but it would be much better if we really chewed on the thoughts that we're reading.
Yeah,
we really tried to feel them.
So since this first paragraph in the section refers again to dissociation, what I thought we would just bring is to look back to the section before to see what he was saying about dissociation. And so what Jesus was saying is, I come as a light into the world that does deny itself everything.
Why don't you say where that is so we can follow it along?
All right. Well, it's in section 4, paragraph 2, the first two sentences.
Okay.
So Jesus is saying, I come as a light into the world that does deny itself everything. And it does this simply by dissociating itself from everything.
Right.
So that's the ego's ploy.
I am different from everybody and everything.
Right.
I exist here only, and everything else is not me.
Right. And so what he goes on to say is that I've made this decision for freedom, for the atonement. I've made this decision, and you don't need to be lonely anymore because you're joined with me now. And therefore the loneliness of the world is gone. But what he really emphasizes, and why I went back to this, is he's saying my decision is not enough.
Jesus's decision.
My decision is not enough. You have to join me in this belief system. Otherwise, it can't just be, help me, Jesus, help me, help me, help me. And then you never decide.
Never change your mind.
Never change your mind, but you're not accepting the belief system he's talking about.
Right.
And the belief system is, I dissociate myself from everything around me.
That's the world.
That's the world. That's the ego. And then we have to figure out, well, how am I going to get by then? How am I going to live? If I'm separate from everything, how am I going to live? So we're
always in conflict when that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the preamble to this section.
I would like to add another thing.
Sure.
So we've been hearing from Jesus that it's important for us to join with him. And this section is going to say the same thing. But there's another place in the Course where it says you can accept the ideas of the Course without having a relationship with Jesus. It'll be more helpful if you do, but it's not required. And I just want to say that for people who are still struggling with their old concept of what Jesus is, all the guilt, all the shame, all the horrible, I personally crucified Jesus with my sins. I mean, that's what I was taught. It took me a long time to break out of that and to recognize what Jesus is as represented by the Course. So I just wanted to, for those people who are not ready, it's the thought system that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you read the first paragraph, because you can break it apart and.
Okay. Well, I prefer to go through the whole thing and then go back, but
we'll go do that.
Okay. All right. So the undivided will of the sonship. Can you be separated from your identification and be at peace? Dissociation is not a solution. It's a delusion. The delusional believe that truth will assail them, and they do not recognize it because they prefer the delusion. Judging truth as something they do not want, they perceive their illusions which block knowledge. Help them by offering them your unified mind on their behalf, as I'm offering you mine on behalf of yours. Alone we can do nothing. but together our minds fuse into something whose power is far beyond the power of its separate parts.
Wow.
But by not being separate, the mind is established in ours,
The
and
mind of God.
the mind of God is established in ours and as ours. This mind is invincible because it's undivided. So for me, a pattern in the Course always, and what he's talking about here is, Jesus is saying, what I'm doing for you, you must do for others to really know what it is that I'm doing for you.
Mm.
Right? He's saying, you have this relationship with me, you've joined me in these ideas. Now you need to do this for others, because Jesus didn't do it just for us, he did it for everything in our life. So then he begins this paragraph with showing what's the opposite of that, and it's dissociation. We put ourselves alone, away from the world, different from everybody.
Right.
Right. And that's what he's saying. And this is delusional. Right. And the only way out is, like he says, 1:5, help them by offering your unified mind on their behalf, as I'm offering you mine as yours. So I think that's, but the whole idea through this and the one before is this idea of loneliness comes from that.
Mhm.
It's like the ego saying, go get rid of all those other people, get rid of all those situations. Though there's what's bothering you. And then all of a sudden you're alone and you feel loneliness.
Right.
That's where
We've made ourselves alone.
right. But that's
Delusionally.
where he's been saying, you don't follow through the premises of the ego. The ego gives you a solution, and that sounds great, but you're not really seeing where it's leading you, because where it's leading you to is loneliness. That's about all I got to say about that one.
Anyone else? Something in there that strikes you as important?
Would you say the delusion is a defense?
Yeah.
No.
The defense against the truth, the defense against who we are. Yeah, it's blocking out God because it's blocking out everybody.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to comment is that I'm floored that Jesus says, alone we can do nothing. So alone Jesus can do nothing? What?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Right. That's why, Laura, to me, it's so counterintuitive, but Jesus is saying, forgive me.
Yeah.
And we go, why do I need to forgive Jesus?
Yeah.
Well, we do, because by forgiving him, we're letting him in. That's what he means.
Uh-huh.
Like we block him
Right.
away from us. And he's saying, forgive me, let me in.
Right.
You're
Right.
lonely without me.
Mm-hmm.
Wapnick, I was listening to him one time, and he was talking about how Jesus had told Helen that if you're raised Christian or raised with Jesus, you've got issues with him. And if you think you don't, you really should look at this stuff, And how kind is that?
Yeah.
Really, really is. I got issues with you, Jesus.
I sure did.
Issues.
I did.
Yeah.
I've said many times, for 16 years I did this course, I just wanted to ignore the fact that Jesus was part of it. And after working with the course, then I could recognize, okay, he's just like anyone else in that I am separating myself from him. He's not doing it. It's not guilt that's out there somewhere. It's guilt I bought into that says, I don't want to deal with you. You make me feel guilty. And he's saying, no guilt. Yeah.
So this sense of, one of the things Jan and I talked about as we went through this undivided will, another sense of that is have one goal.
Right.
That's the ego's confusion. It has many, many goals, many, many goals. And if our one goal is to remember the truth
Right.
of love, then that's an undivided will. We have one purpose, one goal, one solution, one sense of feelings.
I really liked that. Again, sentence 6, alone we can do nothing, but together our minds fuse. So it's you and Jesus. Our minds fuse into something whose power is far beyond the power of its separate parts. course, his mind includes everybody. So that is the atonement.
Mhm.
It's like the atonement at one-ment, the fullness, the perfection, the lack of conflict, the lack of guilt, sin, all of that in the mind of God. When we join with Jesus's mind, our minds fuse into something whose power is far beyond the power of its separate parts, far beyond the power of my little candle.
Yeah. And in 4, it's saying, if you judge truth as something you don't want, you're not going to have the knowledge of who you are.
Right.
It was saying, I don't want that. What is that truth of joining? Why would I want, to be with those people or that situation?
Right. I don't want to be with those evil people.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Yeah. And that we can find something wrong with everybody. Ego can find something wrong with every person,
Right.
and every situation. Ego can see where it's not lacking, it's where it is lacking, where it's not doing the job it should.
Right.
I mean, with ego, there's a funny place where it says something like, if you're listening with ego, you're the only thing in the world that's okay, right?
Yeah. Everything else.
Everything else is wrong. Yeah. So this is a completely separate thing, and it's about our identification. So I was thinking about ID. My driver's license is my ID. What is it doing? This identification is saying who I am. Well, now that's in the world's terms, but that's what this is. Our identification is saying, who are you?
Mhm.
You're one with God, and you're one with the entire sonship.
See, and that's the part we miss, because we do have, where am I going to work? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What am I going to say to somebody? What words do I give?
Yeah.
And all of that seems very diverse, but if we have one goal of the truth of who we are,
Right,
and remembering it, then all of those decisions we make will reflect that one goal,
right.
right? That's what gives us the ability to face every situation with forgiveness, with
Yeah.
atonement.
Any other thoughts about that first paragraph? It's a biggie.
Can I ask John about what you said regarding somewhere in the course? It says that you can do it without Jesus or with him, but it's better to do it with him.
Yeah, where is it?
It's in the manual.
Yeah, that's
It's
what
in the manual. Yeah.
It's in the manual. I'll find it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And
So let's have Kathy start. Would you read paragraph 2 for us, please?
Sure. The undivided will of the sonship is a perfect creator, being wholly in the likeness of God, whose will it is. You cannot be exempt from it if you are to understand what it is and what you are. By the belief that your will is separate from mine, you are exempting yourself from the will of God, which is yourself. Yet to heal is to make whole. Therefore, to heal is to unite with those who are like you. Because perceiving this likeness is to recognize the Father. So I have been listening to a lot of these trauma experts, and they're talking about how everybody has trauma in their life. But when it turns into PTSD, it's when you have trauma and you feel like you're alone, and with Jesus, we never have to be alone again. But it's like that's where it gets weird, is when you think that you're all alone.
Yeah.
Therefore, to heal is to unite with those who are like you, because perceiving this likeness is to recognize the Father. If your perfection is in him and only in him, how can you know it without recognizing him? The recognition of God is a recognition of yourself. There is no
Wow.
separation of God and his creation. You will realize this when you understand that there is no separation between your will and mine. Let the love of God shine upon you by your acceptance of me. My reality is yours and his. By joining your mind with mine, you are signifying your awareness that the will of God is one. It's just talking so beautifully about how we are all one.
Yeah.
One sonship, united with God, we're just one.
Yeah.
And that's who we really are.
That's the whole story of this section. Yeah. I'd have a question or a comment or something about sentence 5. Therefore, to heal is to unite with those who are like you, because perceiving this likeness is to recognize the Father. It seems to me that the import of the whole course is that everyone is like me, right? So it's not like trying to divide the sheep from the goats. It's not trying to decide who is on the spiritual path and who is not. We're all part of the mind of God. So it must be saying, look for the part of that person who is like you.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So that sentence, therefore to heal is to unite with those who are like you, because perceiving this likeness is to recognize the Father. So isn't one of the Beatitudes like, I can't go into the worship hall if I have hate for my brother?
Well, that's not a beatitude, but it is in the Bible.
It is in the Bible. I can't, if I try and go to God or I go to truth and I have hate of another, that's just not going to work.
Right.
Because
That's right.
I'm saying they're different than me,
Right.
right? And therefore, how can I know the oneness if I'm making them different?
Yeah. So it's saying, so in that Bible story, it's saying, if you want to go to God and you find you've got a problem with your brother, leave your gift right there and go settle it with your brother.
Yeah.
Go heal your relationship with your brother, because you can't go to God without everyone else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he has that theme all through the workbook. You got to clear it up here.
Yeah.
Before you go back to truth.
Yeah.
Because here's where you made the problem. Here's where, like it said at the beginning, you're separating yourself from everything around you. And you think being alone and separate is going to keep you safe, but all it does is give you loneliness.
Yeah. Yeah. And victimization, the feeling of being a victim of this vast world outside my mind, which is not possible. Yeah.
I might add one thing before we move on. As I was listening to you talk, I was reminded on sentence 5. I read for many years before I came to the course, an author named Joel Goldsmith, who basically taught the course. Basically the same thing, but he died in the early 60s, but he was the Course in Miracles. And one thing that stuck with me was he was a well-known healer, that he came to understand that he wasn't healing anything except his perception.
Right.
And his perception, the healing came from recognizing the divinity in the person that he was working with, regardless of the appearance. And I was kind of reminded of that as I read sentence number 5, because I think there's a lot of truth in it. Well, not a lot, it is true.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Yeah.
See, that's where this to me is what's so loving about the course, is because he meets us there with our sense of, let's make myself be okay. I want myself to be okay. I don't want to be endangered. But in order for that to be the case, I have to identify with the truth of who I am.
Right.
With the truth of who they are.
Exactly.
Rather than separating from them. I mean, over and over again, he pushes that idea. I got to heal. This is where I made the problem.
The ego is the problem.
Yeah.
The separation is the problem.
Right.
Did you find that spot that you were going to look for with Eric? No. Okay.
But I will.
Well, okay. Just maybe after class we could. We'll add it. You know what we'll do? We'll add it to the recording, the identification, so that you can stay present. Sentence 9. There's 8. There's no separation of God and his creation. Okay, so we're still part of God. You will realize this, sentence 9, when you understand that there is no separation between your will and mine. So he's really starting to let us know that a relationship with Jesus is going to be very helpful to us, because we can understand that he has no ego. And therefore, his will is the will of God. And now his will is my will is the will of God. You know, it says in the Course many times, you are the will of God. That's what you are. So this is all helping us to pull back from the identification with the physical world
Right.
and all of its parts to the oneness of the one self that we share with the sonship, with Jesus, with God.
And that, the section in the manual you referred to of whether or not you accept him or not into your life, he does say that these ideas can be very helpful to anybody, but if you will share your joys and your pains with me,
Right,
then I can help you further.
right,
And that's a lot of what we talked about in this is what are the dynamics in the mind? What is the mind doing in this situation? How is it now feeling loneliness? How is it separating itself from love by separating itself from everything around it?
right.
Right. Those are the ideas that we can share with him. Like I heard somebody say yesterday that they're following guidance and then they end up in this horrible place and it's the wrong thing. And they're going like, why didn't you tell me before that it was going to end up here? Like kind of thing.
Like blaming guidance?
Yeah, blaming guidance or
Yeah.
like it's like we can know as we meet it when we set the goal of truth. Then everything that happens can be the means for that goal.
Right.
Nothing has to be an obstacle to that goal.
Right.
But that's the advantage of accepting Jesus into your life,
Right.
because he's gone beyond this. Like I think of him as the graduate student.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been through this.
Right.
And he's saying, I know exactly where you're at.
Right.
I can lift you up right from that place.
I look at him as a hiking guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. How about Eric? Would you read paragraph 3?
Well, let's pause just
Oh,
for
okay.
a
You
minute.
still got more?
So is there anything in that paragraph that again, that strikes you or something you'd like to comment on?
Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed with the thought that God's will is my will. I mean, actually believing that. I'm sure I'm not the only one with that. I'm sure that's the same sense of separation that we were born into, but the further going, I keep coming back to that point, the further I go in this is that at some point I just have to accept that when I've done this work and I'm in that place that I've done all I need to do and the rest of it is, but it's just an overwhelming thought for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
The whole idea of God is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why Jesus is helpful. We can imagine him as a person. If he's totally identified with God, great. But God is beyond our conception. Jesus isn't. I think that's why, at least for me, that he's useful, helpful.
Right, that's true, because if it's just angels and perfected beings and all of that, which are there to help us,
Yeah.
all that, but when it's a human being that can realize the truth, through this forgiveness and that, then that gives us hope.
Right.
Because we do get stuck in these very, we have people who don't know where they're going to live after November 1st. They don't know what they're going to do. Those are the human problems that we have. How am I going to live? How am I going to be safe? Well, when you're an angel and you're a perfected being, you don't have those issues.
Yeah, right.
But Jesus knows what it's like to be embodied and to be fearful and to feel shame and guilt. And he can help us up from that. So being a human being, I mean, that was the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, and Buddha would say the same thing, when we get so confused, reality makes an incarnation, an avatar, a being who's born,
A divine being.
who's born as a human being with the struggles as a human being, and they realize the truth in one life. Right? So it gives me a lot of comfort to know that he did this as a human being,
Right.
not just as an avatar, not just as an incarnation.
Let's go on then. Paragraph 3, can Eric read that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say before that actually that I'm feeling quite uncomfortable with the whole Jesus thing. Probably for the same reasons that you had, John, actually. And I think part of it, at least, is like the whole of the religious world is calling upon Jesus.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't want to be associated with that, really.
Yeah, right.
So therefore, it's like now I'm asked to go back to Jesus, and it's like this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So there's the real resistance to that. I mean, it's almost the opposite of what you were saying, Timothy, that I'm okay with the Holy Spirit because that's God, but then you bring in a person into it and it's like, no, don't want that.
Yeah.
But I can see that it's going to be, it's true that it's got to be good to have this Jesus character as a guide and so on, who is human as well as divine, but still I can't quite get there. It's not just like clicking into place that I can have this, that, you know, it's a possibility. It still feels like, no, can't do that. You know, so,
In fact, there's actually a scholastic scholarly term called triumphalism of my way. Jesus is the only way. Christianity is the only way to God. That's triumphalism.
And we've been taught that.
Right.
And he's very clearly in this course saying there are other paths for other people. You know, take it with a grain of salt, you know, or when you read that, you could think Holy Spirit. Because there's another place in the course where it says Jesus is the manifestation of the Holy Spirit. That's all he is. And he doesn't even have a body. So,
but
you know.
But the point of that triumphalism, the way that it caused so many problems, because it was like one size fits all.
Yeah.
They tried to put everybody into a certain box. And if you didn't fit in that box, then you're going to hell.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. That's the Jesus we were taught.
Right.
Yeah.
But what the course is saying, if love is to be real, it has to meet you right where you're at.
Yeah.
With the struggle over how am I going to live and how am I going to be safe? But more importantly, how am I going to live a life that's a reflection of my true self, of my true being?
Right.
How am I going to live that?
Yeah.
So one thing that's helped me, I don't know if it'll be helpful to you, is I've heard some teachers say, well, Jesus of the Course, which distinguishes from sort of our misperception of Jesus from the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's his, not his evil twin, but his better twin. He's clarifying all the messages that people didn't understand. So sometimes it's helpful for me just to think Jesus from the Course would say, as opposed to, I don't know if that's helpful, but.
JC, Jesus of the Course.
Yeah, because all we know of the original Jesus 2,000 years ago is what people reported of him. And it all had to be filtered through their, I'll use the word primitive metaphysics. And we're much more aware now of how our minds work. And so he can bring forth a whole lot of more sophisticated and helpful information. But, you know, do what you need to do to side skirt your fears. You could ask for help. You know, that would be the way to do it.
You know, it's worth mentioning this historical point in this, right? That the Catholic Church, as it began with Augustine, he realized the idea of sin makes no sense if love is true, and the idea of time makes no sense with eternity. But what Augustine said was the average person is not capable of understanding this. So it decided to speak to them as if hell is real, if sin is real, like that. But is what you just said. That's what changed. We have much more understanding of the mind and how it works and how it maps onto the world and what's our relationship between our mind and the world. We know much more about that.
Okay, paragraph 3.
Yeah.
God's oneness and ours are not separate because his oneness encompasses ours. I like that, actually. The word encompasses. it's sort of like, it's like a blanket thrown over it, isn't it? It just covers it all.
Yeah, yeah.
To join with me is to restore his power to you because we are sharing it. I offer you only the recognition of his power in you, but in that lies all truth. As we unite with him. Glory be to the union of God and his holy sons. All glory lies in them because they are united. The miracles we do bear witness to the will of the Father for his Son and to our joy in uniting with his will for us. Sentence 3, I offer you only the recognition of his power in you, because in that lies all truth. It's like, that's all you're getting. Just that recognition, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you notice in that paragraph the two qualities of ourself that he's been appealing to since the beginnings of this chapter? In that paragraph?
Power would be one.
That's one. What's the other one?
Glory.
Glory. Power and glory is what Jesus is constantly putting us in touch with. You have
chapter,
all power
yeah.
over this situation, and your glory is in having all power over every situation.
Yeah.
You're not a victim of that
Right.
world around you. You are one with that love. You are one with that person.
You know what really jumped out at me was sentence 7, the miracles we do bear witness to the will of the Father for his Son. It's like this, everything so far has said, you are spirit. You're one spirit, one with God, one with everybody. So where does that leave the physical world? It's in that delusion. Dissociation, the delusion, the illusion, the physical world is a projection of loss and lack.
Yeah.
And so miracles, being healing, well, they show up in the physical world, but they come from the recognition of our one self. Interestingly, though, he says that we do. I'm thinking that means me and Jesus. Like call on him for healing.
Right. And it also refers to what we do with others when we join in the atonement with them.
That's true.
You know, it's what we've done together.
Right.
We've joined, we've made everyone as entitled to atonement as we want to be.
Right.
Like didn't he say recently, when everyone is as welcome to you as you want to be to God,
Yeah.
then you've made it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good line. So he is saying in sentence 3, he's offering us only the recognition of God's power in us. So the undivided will of the sonship, the title of this section, is saying you are one with the Father and have all the power of the Father. And there's workbook lessons that say the same thing. Isn't it amazing how dense we are? He's telling us over and over and over how powerful our minds are, how powerful our will is. And we're still like, oh, I can't do that because X. You know, I can't do that because somebody won't like it, or I'm making up a story about my powerlessness.
Right. But he takes that very ability of us to resist love and says, okay, you got resistance going on, resist the ego.
Right.
So he's not making anything we made bad.
Right.
Even separation.
Right.
You've separated from love, separate
from the ego. Right.
You know, that's the first step. Let me separate from this illusion of myself.
Right.
Let me find my true power and glory. I mean, I'm with Dale in the paragraph before that. When I say my power, was it my wisdom, my holiness, my strength is God's? That sounds like real Oedipal. Like I've set myself up for a big crashing into the wall when I say my will is God's will. What?
Yeah, right.
You know, that seems really scary, or can be when I'm stuck in the fear.
When we're coming from ego, when we think our power and glory is of our ego, that's really a setup.
Yeah.
Dale, could you read 4 for us, please?
Okay. When you unite with me, you are uniting without the ego, because I have renounced the ego in myself and therefore cannot unite with yours. That was talking about Jesus again and my total misunderstanding of who he was. I've come to peace with who Jesus was. I enjoy, I know this, I can say this to this group, I guess, I enjoy the relationship I have with that feeling of who Jesus is now, because all the guilt is gone.
Great.
But it took me changing totally my perception, and it was totally me, nothing but just my misunderstanding, to finally enjoy that relationship and feel at ease and comfort, and actually comforted by it. But man, that was a long road.
A long road for me
and
too.
I never would have gotten here without that point, without this course. It just wouldn't have happened. Because I finally understand what he's saying about renouncing the ego. I don't always do it very well, but I do get it. So let's see. Our union is therefore the way to renounce the ego in you. Okay. Next sentence. Our unions. I haven't thought of it in that way before. And Jan, what you said about Jesus in the form was that bridge, was really meaningful to me, by the way. That really meant a lot to me, because it clarified something I'd never really thought about, of trying to understand the power of the mind of God. And then that Jesus was the bridge to really teach us what it was. I'd never really thought about it before. So our union is a way. The truth in both of us is beyond the ego. Our success in transcending the ego is guaranteed by God. And I share this confidence for both of us and all of us. Okay, well, it gets back to guaranteed by God. Again, that comes back to accepting that my mind is the mind of God's. And that's just something I'm going to have to work on, because it's just every time I do this, I come up with something else I need to work on.
Big surprise.
Yeah, right. So let's see, where were they? I bring God's peace back to all his children because I received it of him for us all. Okay, this is bringing up dredging up some old stuff again about Jesus died for our sins and all that. I know that's not what it means, but it's something in there is kicking around with me that's hit on a spot. I received it of him for us all. And I guess my understanding would be that now that he's just showing us that he overcame the world, and that we can do the same thing.
Right.
Is that a simple explanation of it?
Absolutely. He literally says that in paragraph 4, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. Let me find that.
What do you mean?
It says the kingdom is perfectly united and perfectly protected, and the ego will not prevail against it. Amen.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. And then then he goes before that. In this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer.
And so joining with him, in other words, he's let go of the ego. if we can let go of the ego by joining with him, the ego can't join in that journey. If we join with Jesus, there can't be any ego there.
Yeah.
So then we have everything he has.
That's what it's going to say in the next paragraph.
Okay.
That whole thing. But I mean, the whole idea that by joining with him, by recognizing the truth of who we are with him, is rooting us in the truth of who we are to God.
Right.
I mean, that.
I don't think you finished the paragraph.
Timothy, could you expand on it? So I'm struggling of joining with him. Is that the atonement? Is that how we join with him?
Well, what he says, what he says in 6, which is what we're still building on from
Chapter 6.
What he's saying is that you have to join me in the same belief system that I'm believing in, because without your part, mine doesn't do any good. That was the whole point of the section before this, is that his decision, it's like typically, in the typical Christian tradition is like, I'm guilty, I'm sinful, but Jesus's work saved me from that.
His suffering saved me.
And just understanding that's enough. But what the Course is saying is that you have to do the same thing that Jesus did. He set that model for you. And he's saying you can do this too. But unless you do what he did, right, you're not going to feel joined with him.
Right. So I want to.
But let me just stop. So am I addressing what you said?
Yeah, I think so. It's some of my own Christianity kicking up. Join with him. It's just words. And I guess for myself, I'm trying to get past the words of what joining with him is. If it's the atonement and I forgive myself for the separation, and I know that Jesus overcame that I can do.
Yeah.
So that's easy. But
right. So part of that, so a practical example, a pragmatic example of that is somebody's bugging me. They're trying to hurt me, but I'm innocent.
Right.
So in my innocence, I will overlook how horrible they are. No, they're innocent too.
Right.
But we think by being innocent, we're going to sacrifice our true interests.
I would like to give you my take on that atonement thing. That was your question. So joining with Jesus is the atonement, but what he's saying in this whole section is when you join with him, you're joining with the one spirit, the one self, because all there is spirit and the illusion of ego, right? The illusion of, there's oneness and the illusion of separation. Those are the two thought systems. So by joining with him, yes, we are joining with the atonement, the at one meant with God and with everyone.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's no ego left in him. So so then that puts us in touch with who we really are. So I don't think he finished the paragraph. Let's let Dale.
I had one sentence left.
Yeah, okay.
Nothing can prevail against our united wills because nothing can prevail against God's, which is all the things we've just been talking about.
Yeah. Oh,
I was just going to make a comment on sentence 4. Our success in transcending the ego is guaranteed by God, and I share this confidence for both of us and all of us. Because he's transcended the ego completely, then he must realize that we are already home.
Yeah.
So he can be confident because we're there.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's kind of seen, I guess, like the instantaneous and God's answer to our thought of separation.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
And then in 5, that he gives the criteria for to know whether or not we've joined him, and it's peace. I bring, what do you say? I bring God's peace to all his children. That's how we know we've joined with him.
Oh yeah.
Because peace is like, there's no conflict between these two thought systems.
Right.
I've accepted my peace, but I have no unmet needs at that problem. I haven't futurized the solution to this problem. I accept the peace now.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference between the Holy Spirit's And the ego is always futurizing the solution. Like when you change, I'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's now, that piece is now. That's the big criteria.
I mean, this whole thing is just saying to me, you are spirit, we are one spirit. There's nothing to worry about. Any conflict comes from the ego, and we can give that up. Give up all conflict, tribulation.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on paragraph 4? Leanne, can you carry on for us?
Would you know the will of God for you? Ask it of me who know it for you, and you will find it. I will deny you nothing, as God denies me nothing. Ours is simply the journey back to God, who is our home. Wherever fear intrudes anywhere along the way to peace, road to peace, it is because the ego has attempted to join the journey with us and cannot do so. Sensing defeat and angered by it, the ego regards itself as rejected and becomes retaliative. You are invulnerable to its retaliation because I am with you. On this journey, you have chosen me as your companion instead of the ego. Do not attempt to hold on to both, or you will try to go in different directions and lose the way. Well, there's a lot in there, and that paragraph kind of speaks to me personally.
Tell us.
As just some stuff that's been going on in my head the last couple of days. So it's interesting how the ego really wants to wreck your world.
Yeah.
And once it gets a little bit of momentum, if you give it any sense of energy, then it snowballs very quickly.
Yeah.
I was presented with an opportunity on, I don't know, it's Thursday, I think. And I didn't know it was going to be a super timely, like, okay, I have to make a decision like right away to make the best of the situation. So I realized that like Thursday night. Well, the ego automatically went into like, how in the world are you going to do this? You don't have enough of time. This is da 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 da. Are you going to be able to do it? I mean, it just exploded, and I could feel myself just sinking into this darkness.
Right.
I mean, just sinking. Well, actually, it was like quicksand. I was going down quickly.
Wow.
But the good news is I could see it all. I knew exactly what was happening. Now, I didn't have very good control over it yesterday. The ego was winning in a big way. But I woke up this morning, reflected on it again, and had a conversation with Dell. And he's like, you know what you're doing? And I said, yeah, I'm giving the ego all the power. And also my type A personality says, you don't have to go balls to walls on everything, Leanne. You can, excuse my language, but you can just say, no, I have this much time to dedicate to this. And that's what I can do. So it was an interesting 24-hour process for me to get back to the point of the ego not winning and unraveling the damage that the ego had done in that 24-hour period. But that's pretty much what this is saying. I mean, you can't hold on to both. Right. And as long as I was holding on to both, I mean, I was miserable. I was depressed. I was full of anxiety. I was overwhelmed. I was like, just you name it, the thought was there. But when you release that and go, no, if I just align with God and know my peace and make a decision from peace, then it just changed the whole scenario.
Right on.
Oh, it's so great.
Right on.
What's really great is you could see it. You identified it as ego.
Yeah.
That all conflict is ego. So as soon as we start to lose the peace, and we know that that's what it is, I always think I'm 2/3 of the way out when I recognize that's what the problem is.
Yeah, but I was justifying it at first. I was justifying the ego. So I found myself justifying my stance with the ego first. So I went there first. And then I'm like, then I was pissed at myself for doing that. I'm like, what are you doing, Leanne? You know better. Then I had to kind of unwind that justification and that damage that I had done. It doesn't take much though when you've been studying this. I mean, for me, I was able to go, okay, I can make a new decision like right now. I don't have to judge myself for all the crap I did yesterday and all the mental gymnastics I did yesterday. There's no point of that, but I could. My old self would have spent another week in that spot going, well, why'd I do that? Blah, blah, blah. And so I'm pretty happy that I was able to unwind it quickly. Now, I know I'll still have some more trigger points that come up through this situation because really my time that I have over the next like 12 days is like, I've got 3,001 things that are all happening in this really short time frame that all have to be addressed. I can't move them around and I can't change the restraints of my time, but I can change my thoughts about that.
Right.
Right on.
Oh, that's really a great example. And I think we've all been there. You know how that it is relating as I'm reading this paragraph is that it says, whenever fear intrudes anywhere along the road to peace, it is because the ego has attempted to join the journey with us and cannot do so. And it kind of is giving us a metaphor of the ego is like another being. It's not who we are. It's like the ego is trying to join. Here we are. We're walking along the road. This is called the journey back. And we've got the metaphor of a journey back to God. And the ego is coming in and yak, 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 trying to give us conflict, trying to give us upset and help us to buy into peace. But it's not who we are. In this metaphorical description of walking along the road and the ego is coming in and trying to join us, we recognize it's not who we are. And that's what you did, Leanne. At a certain point, you said, that's ego. I don't want to listen to it. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is so evocative and descriptive in sentence 6. So if I'm feeling defeated, if I'm experiencing anger, he's saying you're identifying with the ego.
For sure.
And as that identification of feeling defeated and angered, you're going to retaliate. And that's what look what they did. Look what they did. How can I overlook that?
Right.
You know, the ego is sitting there defeated and it's angry and it wants revenge. It wants to retaliate. And I can see that when people act out in certain ways to me, and part of my mind wants to go, you can't overlook that.
Yeah.
You know, you can't overlook that. But I'm sensing defeat. I'm sensing loss.
Because you're identifying with the ego.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why the peace is so important.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can be at peace right now, despite that, that retaliation.
And I think another form of the retaliation Leanne also alluded to, and that is, oh, I'm so bad. I listened to the ego. Yeah, that's more ego. Yeah.
So that last sentence there is talking about exactly what he said at the beginning of this chapter. The difference between freedom and imprisonment, we don't know, right? And if you try and listen to both the ego and the Holy Spirit, you'll be going in different directions, but you really won't be going anywhere.
Right.
And that's the key notion.
Yeah.
I'm just spinning my wheels in
Yeah.
this spot. And I'm accomplishing nothing.
Right.
Right. And that's what he said. You're just confused at that point. So don't try and hold on to what the ego is telling you about anger and defeat and retaliation.
Right.
And getting its way. Don't do that. You don't have to do that.
We don't have to listen to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how he introduced this chapter, is you need to change the direction of the curriculum from bondage to freedom and from pain to joy.
Okay.
He's told us explicitly, that's the goal now, freedom and joy.
All right.
So can I just say something? So Leanne, as you were saying that and explaining this process you went through, I just had this vision of the whole process you just described, and your higher self or the Holy Spirit sitting patiently by and then waiting are you done now? Come here. Let me put my arms around you. It's going to be okay. And it's just like the most perfectly loving parent, just like not getting upset at all with you, having all the patience in the world, and just being like, come here. Let me hug you. Let me hold you. It's going to be okay. So you're there. You made it. It's great.
Yeah.
And every time we have every time that battle happens and we go above the battleground into identification with spirit and our true self, we have made a huge advance. So it's not like, one at a time, moving the beads along the string. It's more like when you move one of those beads along the string, the whole thing goes. We know now when we do that we have the power. And we've healed a lot more than just that one situation. So congratulations. And thanks for giving us an example. We all do that. We all have been there and probably are going to be there in large or small ways again today or this week. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So he's very clear. You are invulnerable to its retaliation.
Yeah.
We have to see that the ego is trying to retaliate.
Yeah.
But you're invulnerable because I am with you. So what he said in the chapter before, he said, your will is as free as mine because God's made. He says, if you want to be like me, you can be like me and join me. If you don't, I will wait until you're ready.
Yeah.
And that's what he's saying we can do for others, right? If they're coming from their ego,
that's
if
right.
Seem like they're attacking, we can wait upon them until they're ready to accept the peace. And we can just demonstrate that.
Right.
And then they have a choice when they're going to accept it.
Right. That's what he said in paragraph 4, sentence 4. It said, I share this confidence in transcending the ego for both of us and all of us. In other words, this is another time when he was saying, everybody's going to get there. Everybody will wake up. So be kind to them. They're on the path along with you, no matter what it looks like.
See, that's very loving to me. So he's saying, if you want to be like, this is a section before, if you want to be like me, I will help you, knowing that we are alike. It goes back to identification, right? Knowing that we're alike. If you want to be different, I will wait until you change your mind.
Yeah.
That's very loving to me because he's going, I understand how you're running this fear game and you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had days like that where it seems impossible to control my mind because that stuff just keeps coming up and it keeps coming up. And it
seems impossible.
Well, it does seem impossible at that point. But to know that he has patience, that I'm not, like I'm screwed, but to know he has patience is really comforting.
Yeah. Nothing bad really happened.
Can I just ask a question on sentence 7? Timothy, you're just talking about you are invulnerable to its retaliation because Jesus is with you, but also, is it fair to say that you also have to be defenseless against the ego, because if you engage with it, then you get stuck in that spiral, right? So it's kind of like reach for Jesus. Right. Don't engage with the ego. Don't try and fight it, because that's what I do all the time is I just get into the fight and then it's too late.
That is ego.
Yeah, you've got to take a step back and just say, you know what, you're insane. I'm not even going to try and rationalize with you. I'm just going to Jesus. Bye.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but this metaphor came to me. So for those of you who have ever tried water skiing, you're in the water, you're holding on, there's resistance, and then you're on the top, right? And then you're in a different world. It's like just hold on to that rope.
Yeah.
And the good news is, and the Course is really promising that, yes, if once you get into the ego, going down will be very quick and it'll be going down and down. But he said, the Holy Spirit will work just as well and bring you up and up and up and much quicker.
And it's just our choice.
And it's our choice. Right.
So Laura, would you read 6, please?
Certainly. The ego's way is not mine, but is also not yours. The Holy Spirit has one direction for all minds, and the one he taught me is yours. Let us not lose sight of his direction through illusions, for only illusions of another direction can obscure the one for which God's voice speaks in all of us. Well, all illusions are another direction, I think, right?
Yeah.
Away from Jesus.
Right.
Never accord the ego with the power to interfere with the journey. It has none, because the journey is the way to what is true. Leave all illusions behind and reach beyond all attempts of the ego to hold you back. I go before you because I am beyond the ego. Reach, therefore, for my hand because you want to transcend the ego. My strength will never be wanting, and if you choose to share it, you will do so. I give it willingly and gladly, because I need you as much as you need me. So that reminds me of a story I heard somewhere along the line about, it relates to someone who has an addiction problem, but you fall in this big, deep hole and you're stuck there and you don't know how to get out. And people are like, I don't know how to get out. I don't know how to get out. And someone comes by and he jumps in the hole. And he's like, what are you doing? What? Now we're both stuck. And he's like, oh no, I know the way out and I'm going to show you. And that's exactly what Jesus did or is doing. He knows the way out. He's jumping in the hole with us and he's going to show us the way out.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
It's just so lovely, that whole visual of, I have the strength, take my hand.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea that he needs us as much as we need him is how he begins to establish with us our equality with him. He's saying, I made this decision and you can make it too. Right?
The equality of us and Jesus seems huge.
Yeah.
But you know what? He's telling us, just choose peace whenever you're tempted by the ego's voice. And little by little, we'll be escaping from the belief that the ego is who we are. Remember, this is all about who are we? The first sentence in this section was, can you be separated from your identification, from who you are, and be at peace? Who we are is going to give us peace. If we're not in peace, we're listening to the ego.
See, that's the part of recognizing all our thinking begins with, what do I see myself as?
Right.
And that's the part we're missing.
Right.
But that's why there's no order of difficulty in miracles, because I can say, I'm not a body, I am free, I'm still as God created me. And in that moment, we can free ourselves.
Yeah, so sentence 4 that Laura just read says, never accord the ego the power to interfere with the journey. We're going to God. The ego has no power. We just remember that. We're out of the hole. Any other thoughts about this? This is a very powerful section, isn't it? I mean, it's powerful and it brings up a lot of resistance. I want to just share with you how I managed that many years of not wanting to hear about Jesus. I imagined whenever I read that, there was this wise, holy person who was a Hispanic gardener. He was wearing those green kind of overalls like workers wear. And that's what I substituted for Jesus. I mean, why not? After a while, I stopped being afraid of Jesus and I said, okay, that was the guy.
Right. That's kind of meeting you right where you're at.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like if love can't do that, what's the point of love?
Yeah. Okay, any last thoughts about today? Oh, I'd like to, when we turn off the recording, I'd like to have you stay for a few minutes to talk about time, because we're soon going to get into daylight savings.
Yeah.
So any last thoughts about today? Okay. That's it. This is the passage that we were looking for in the class. Is he, meaning Jesus, God's only helper? No, indeed, for Christ takes many forms with different names until their oneness can be recognized. But Jesus is for you the bearer of Christ's single message of the love of God. You need no other. It is possible to read his words and benefit from them without accepting him into your life. Yet he would help you yet a little more if you will share your pains and joys with him and leave them both to find the peace of God.